his own, wearing a suit as he always does in public. He was itching, we understand, over the weekend to be released today. This was planned and hoped
how many
for.
staff are sick?
Let's see if he answers any questions.
How many of your staff are sick? Thank you very much. Do you think you might be a super spreader, Mr. President?
Somebody yelling out, do you think you might be a super spreader, Mr. President? Of course, he was highly criticized while giving the thumbs up there and a fist pump for his drive-by yesterday around the medical center, waving to supporters, but also the criticism has been possibly exposing his Secret Service agents who were in the car with him.
He will motorcade a short distance to Marine One, which is on the grounds of Walter Reed Medical Center, and then take the very brief trip. It's only about 8 or so miles from the medical center back to the White House, the south lawn of the White House. They initially thought he'd be back about now, so he's a little bit behind schedule, but the president's on his way home. And again, that availability with his doctors earlier, something else that we gleaned from that, Dr. Connolly said nothing's being done at Walter Reed that cannot be done at the White House medical unit. On the ground floor, the basement level, there is a mini hospital almost, if you will, that has a facility to care for the President of the United States. Obviously, they have access to the finest care out there, and they wanted to drive home that point that it's not like you or I going home and being by yourself or with a family. He has medical care at the White House 24/7.
And he's being driven right now to Marine One. That was the shot you were just looking at. And it's so true, Craig, that doctor said earlier today that he's basically received 4 intense treatments right now, specifically of remdesivir, and will receive another treatment tomorrow. So I think the last treatment was at 4:30. He said all of his vitals were fine. He hasn't had a fever, the doctor said, the entire weekend, and was not given any medications to bring down a fever like Tylenol the entire weekend. So the president is on his way home almost. As soon as he gets to Marine One, he'll take off.
I think Nicole Ensalada made the point, and this came up at that availability with the doctors earlier. They would not discuss his chest scan, the lung scan, and that's significant because, as we all know by now, the coronavirus, it really does a number on the lungs. And there was a good deal of curiosity what those scans might tell us, but the Dr. Connolly wouldn't get into that. So that's still a big unknown. But again, he did say in his comments that the president's met or exceeded all criteria that they would use to determine, can we send him home?
He says he's been an exceptional patient, very involved in treatment, but in no way, he made this very clear, has the president, he says, persuaded any of his physicians to act in any way whatsoever. And you're right, he's getting the best treatment, better than anybody probably on the planet would get with these antivirals and some of these drugs not approved yet by the FDA, but they caught it early, they said, and they treated him pretty aggressively.
The president hinting on Twitter that he looks forward to campaigning. Again, we don't know in what fashion, and we still, and Nicole Ensalada touched on this, are trying to get a better sense of what his existence in isolation at the White House is going to look like, whether it's at the residence where the First Lady is, and she's been in isolation because she has also tested positive. Their youngest son lives with them, so is he going to be positioned in a way where he's going to avoid contact with those others? We still don't have a lot of those answers to how that's going to look yet.
They have definitely avoided and not said what the safety precautions are. And as you said, Craig, yes, there's definitely COVID. Kayleigh McEnany just tested positive, the White House press secretary, and 2 of her aides today, too. And as we see a live picture there, it looks like the president climbed in Marine One. We're going to go to Nicole Ensalada. She's live outside of Walter Reed, and we're going to stay on this picture, I assume, and hear your perspective, Nicole.
Well, Lynn, where we are out in front of Walter Reed, we are surrounded by, gosh, I would say it's probably well over 100 supporters who are here. Many of them have been here since Friday, and you probably can hear them in the background. They have been waiting to, they've just wanted to wish the president well, and many of them are quite dedicated and have been out here since he got here. They're all waiting as well to see Marine One. Now, we saw the motorcade, we saw it move just a little bit from our vantage point across Rockville Pike, the main road that runs in front of Walter Reed. And you were talking earlier, Craig and Lynn, about the press conference that the doctors have had. There's second or third, I guess, since the president has been here. And it's interesting, you know, they've been giving a lot of information in terms of his blood pressure and his other vitals. But certain things, they just did not want to go there. And as you mentioned, the lung scan and when the last test he received, that was negative. And that seems to be vital or interesting, and because of so many people in the West Wing are now, you know, coming up positive for COVID-19, especially after the nomination ceremony for the new Supreme Court Justice nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. So that's what it seems to be. It's unclear why exactly they don't want to go there as far as telling us when the president was last tested, or at least came back with a negative test. Now, of course, though, the question moving forward is how is he going to be able to recover inside the White House? And yes, of course, he does have the 24/7 care and the state-of-the-art care there as well. But the question is, how well will he really be able to quarantine inside the White House? And how soon will he be able to get out on the campaign trail? He just tweeted that moments ago that he's quite eager to get out. And obviously part of the drive-by for the supporters yesterday, I think, was part of that, where he just wants to get out and keep on with the campaign process. We are so close to the election. It does sound like the rotors might be revving up just a little bit more there. You probably have a better vantage point than I do as far as being able to see him. We didn't answer any questions, but they are running a little behind, but he should be back at the White House in short order. Craig, Lynn?
He did, he's definitely been tweeting. He tweeted a couple of hours ago while his physicians were giving that news conference saying that he's never felt better, and he felt better than he did 20 years ago. He also said, quote, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." And there has been speculation wondering if the president would perhaps now have some empathy for the thousands and thousands of people around the world who have had to endure this virus, and the over 200,000 people who have terribly been affected.
Lynn?
Yes.
Lynn, can you?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I can interject here if you can hear me, but I heard a gentleman who was standing next to me being interviewed by a local reporter here who said, and he was probably in his 50s, she asked him about COVID, and he said, "I'm not afraid of it because the president survived it." So you have to wonder if you're going to see a lot of folks like that who maybe are not taking it quite as seriously now, because, I mean, you know, he's had the best care out there.
I think the question might be, Craig, too.
You can hear the...
Well, the question might be, what message will the president now send about this virus now that he has been affected?
And to that point, Nicole, what are you seeing there in the reporting? The president, obviously, a COVID patient with a mask, but what is underway at the White House and the West Wing, where we see this outbreak, in a change of approach in dealing with this, perhaps taking it a bit more seriously, given the circumstances?
And just to let you know, Marine One just flew over us directly, making this crowd very, very happy. But to your question, I think his tweet really did almost answer that question, where he said, "Don't let it dominate your life and don't fear it." And I'm not really sure many people out there who are advocating it for you dominating your life, but it did seem like, at least I think a lot of it is in the perception, and the perception of some of the folks that we've been hearing here is that they're not worried about it because he survived it. So his intention may not matter as much as how people perceive those sorts of comments.
There might have been, I think earlier in that news conference, the doctor was asked about some of the president's reactions, and he said he didn't really want to comment on what the president was saying, reference to COVID in general.
Right.
He kind of sidestepped having to disagree medically, a medical professional, to having to disagree with his boss, the president.
And as the president is getting the best of care, we also have to remember that there are many long-term side effects or effects from this virus that even doctors admit they don't understand and can't predict. So you're looking at a live picture of the president.
Exactly, and don't forget...
Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, don't forget that the first antibody cocktail that he received right after this diagnosis was one that's in a very experimental stage and is not readily available to anyone at this point.
Excellent point, yes. And again, he's getting aggressive treatment. Again, if you're just now joining us, President Trump has left Walter Reed Medical Center. He's on Marine One, heading back to the White House. The words from the White House is he will, quote, safely quarantine. It's unclear right now what that means or what that will look like. He's still under treatment right now and will receive one more treatment of remdesivir.
And he's made it quite clear that he plans to, in whatever fashion, pick up where he left off in terms of his campaign. We are a month out now from the election. The vice presidential debate comes up this week. That's going on. Mike Pence is the vice president, that is at a campaign event this evening. So the work of the campaign carries on, though the top of the ticket, we're still not quite clear what it's going to look like for him, because he still does have another few days where he'd have to, theoretically, if you go by the CDC guidelines and the guidelines put forth by the White House Coronavirus Task Force, he'd have to be home for the next several days. And
now there's been also concern and talk of Vice President Mike Pence and his availability to the president, his possible exposure to the virus, what this would mean for the debate. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions in the future, for sure.
And Nicole, and you may have seen this because obviously you're there, but there's been reporting that the president's body man, who is the one who carries his personal items, his suitcase, and whatever. It's the phrase body man implies that they work closely together physically. He has tested positive, and have I seen also that a couple of folks in the White House residence, whether it's a valet or a housekeeper, people who work closely with the first family, that they have now tested positive also.
I believe yes, in fact, I'm seeing what you're seeing about the body man as well. I actually think, if I am not mistaken, I think that may have been one of the same staffers we heard about yesterday. I'm not exactly sure. It's starting to get difficult to keep up. And I do know, I believe his valet actually had tested. If he has, I'm not sure if he has more than one. We should make that clear. But there is one valet who I believe tested positive several weeks ago. And that started a flurry of speculation about who else within the White House would actually end up with a positive diagnosis. We also know that several journalists with the White House Correspondents Association has said that several journalists have come up positive. The thing about Kayleigh McEnany is that we saw her yesterday in a gaggle, which is when she comes out and meets the press, wearing a mask but then taking it off, approaching the reporters. From some photos I saw, it looked like she wasn't terribly close, maybe about 3 or 4 feet. And from what I understand, it was a short interaction with the reporters. But 2 folks in her shop, in the press shop at the White House, have now come up positive. And most of the time when we see her in the White House press room, the briefing room, she is not wearing a mask. So we also wonder now whether or not a lot of those standards and regulations, rules within the White House for those who work in the West and the East Wings, whether or not they will change now as well. Whether or not it will be mandatory is something that we've heard some White House officials interviewed earlier. Wouldn't really go there, wouldn't really say it would be mandatory or not, but we'll have to see if that's going to change.
Definitely feels like the White House is a hot spot. And you're right, Nicole, Kayleigh McEnany pretty much does that on a regular basis. She'll come out to, even outside, wearing a mask, and then she takes it off. We can see you now, Nicole, and she starts speaking to reporters. And there was, some pushback today from reporters saying, yeah, you were asymptomatic, but yesterday you spoke to us, and now today, you're testing positive. So there's some uproar about that as well. It will be interesting to see how the administration does continue to do their business as we're looking at a live picture of Marine One about to land there at the White House.
Well, it looks like they're passing the memorials there. Off in the foreground is the Washington Monument, so they're getting very close to the White House South Lawn, where customarily Marine One will make that landing. And in fact, you can see the White House. We're looking at it from the north lawn, underneath that little stripe of words there, that banner. So we're looking at the front of the White House, if you will. And that is the back side. That's the south lawn. And we should expect to see, if we have that shot available to us again, Marine One come into view momentarily.
It is said that, like I said earlier, that the president was itching to get back home, and that he's, known to be a creature of habit, likes his own bed, likes his own people, and really, nobody likes to be in the hospital, but it was said over the weekend that he was saying, I want to leave Monday, and we got word around noon today from him in a tweet saying, I'm leaving at 6:30 after his last treatment.
And based on what we heard from Dr. Conley, there was no one on the medical team who recommended against the president going back to the White House today. He was asked directly, of all of you who were involved in the president's care, did any one of you say, no, he should not? And he said, no, it was unanimous. They thought he could go home today.
Yeah, he really made a point to stress that, stressing also that President Trump has not influenced their treatment of him in any shape whatsoever, but was very involved in his own treatment, had good spirits, didn't need any medication like Tylenol to bring down any kind of fever, and only needed oxygen briefly twice. Didn't really go into the details of his blood oxygen dipping, but there was word that that happened over the weekend. And we're seeing the back end of the helicopter here, which just landed.
And again, the president comes home, but to a very... Oh, Nicole, I hear you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if you were able to hear me. Just one other quick note about the press conference today with the doctors. They also said they had some infectious disease experts who were kind of monitoring and taking some different tests. They made it sound like maybe some more cutting edge sort of tests that maybe are not normally available in most hospitals to see what his viral load is, to know whether or not he remains contagious. They say that usually that guideline is 7 to 10 days, but they say it may not be that long, so they're monitoring that to see if he truly would be contagious up to 7 to 10 days, or whether or not it might end sooner. They say that those are numbers that they will be monitoring, which of course is crucial. That's very important to whether or not he then has contact with other people.
And in that same news conference, Nicole, earlier today, his physician also said that there was no live virus within the president's body. So you're right. I mean, he's getting the best care and some unusual treatments and observations, really.
You can hear in the distance there as the...
Oh, absolutely. And
on these final days before this...
the point I was just going to make is you could hear the crowds who are assembled at the fence line there, the horns honking. It's always a spectacle when Marine One comes in for that landing. And on an occasion like this, for the president's supporters, it's an even bigger spectacle or a bigger occasion to welcome him back home. Nicole?
Yeah, no, exactly. But as far as the live virus, yeah, they were talking about, because we're talking about that and trying to measure that viral load, because right now we're going by, or the experts are really going by what they're learning as they go with COVID-19, because it is so new to so many doctors and even the infectious disease experts. But they say they're trying to find something that's a little bit more tailor-made, really, almost to the president, to try to see if they can come up with some new parameters to determine when he might be more contagious or less contagious or not contagious at all. And it seems also from the experts that I've been hearing that they really threw everything at this. We're hearing that those corticosteroids are usually for those who are really, really struggling. He did have that experimental antibiotic cocktail very early on, so it seems like they were quite aggressive from the very beginning. And Dr. Conley basically said that. He said, this is the President of the United States, so we're going to maximize all of our efforts.
And this is quite a sight. I mean, my goodness, everything that's happened this year, and especially Friday, watching him leave the White House to fly to Walter Reed Medical Center, not knowing when he'd return. And here he is back on the White House lawn 72 hours later, going to what they call safely isolate somewhere in the White House, continue business, the administration says, and still be under treatment, getting the best care in the whole world. So he hasn't left the helicopter yet. We're expecting that any minute. And you can, hear the crowd.
We hope we'll have access ordinarily. I made the point the other day, there's a group of reporters and camera people who follow him when he moves. And ordinarily they're stationed by the doorway on the other side of that helicopter. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to see that shot when he walks right back in. Either on the ground floor, which is ordinarily what they have you do, but you notice that
the lights are on.
On the main floor, it's called the main floor of the White House. It's a bit of a climb of stairs, but it's adorned in flags and it's decked out
to the right,
for the occasion.
Is that him? Or maybe I'm seeing things.
That's him.
Okay.
So, well, you know why? And it's always the showman. It gives him an opportunity to stop at the balcony and give a wave.
I mean, this camera is pretty far away, but that's what you were talking about, Craig, the still picture that we will see, I'm sure, all over social media very soon. Standing in front of several American flags and the chandelier on. And
it's a bit more of a dramatic way to return to the house as opposed to going in through the basement entrance, which is what they usually do here on the main floor with the lights and the flags. It'll be the shot that makes the front pages tomorrow for sure.
And perhaps he's going to stay there on the balcony until Marine One takes off. He's been there a good 30 seconds, so somebody else is coming up the stairs on the left-hand side. I'm not sure, maybe that is a photographer. But the president is back home at the White House, ready to quarantine, they say, safely, and continue the business, the Trump administration says, of the people.
And that's it for now. We'll have more throughout the evening. That is 7 News at 6:30. Thanks.
Have a great night. I'll see you on Deco at 7:30.
He's getting out.
Though he may not entirely be out of the woods yet, he'll be surrounded by world-class medical care 24/7.
And joyride blowback. Was his Secret Service detail put at risk?